Good morning, students. Today I am going to talk about how to take a case of postmenopausal bleeding. I will not be talking about the treatment part of it. I am just going to deal with the history of how to take history in a case of postmenopausal bleeding and what are the investigations you are required to do. So, what does postmenopausal bleeding actually mean? Postmenopausal bleeding means it refers to bleeding from the vaginal tract after the woman is an established case of menopause. That is, after 12 months of cessation of the menstrual cycles, if there is bleeding from the genital tract, then we call it as postmenopausal bleeding. And what is the significance? Why is it significant? Because however slight the bleeding is, it has to be properly investigated and followed up. It should not be left like that, and it should never be underestimated, because as many as 1/3 cases are because of malignancy. So she needs a proper history taking and follow up of the case. So same importance is also given to those cases where normal menstruation continues after the age of 55 years. Nowadays, what is the age of menopause? It is around 52 to 55 years. So in case the woman is continuing to menstruate even after 55 years, it is also to be taken as a postmenopausal bleeding, and she has to be investigated and properly followed up as a case of postmenopausal bleeding. So that is the reason why it has to be properly investigated. Next, I'm going to tell you a case, then you can send me your replies. We'll see how far you are correct. So Mrs. X, a 60-year-old postmenopausal lady, she is complaining of bleeding per vaginum on and off since 1 month. So what do you think? How will you manage this case? What is important in this case? Yeah, if you are hearing, can you send me your replies? What is needed is proper history taking and then investigate the lady. That is the most important thing to do in such a case. So how should your history be? And what are the most common causes of postmenopausal bleeding? You have to keep in mind, and then you have to take history accordingly and then investigate her. So if 60-year-old postmenopausal woman complaining of bleeding per vaginum, yeah, fibroids, endometrial polyp, but they are not so common. Main thing you have to keep in mind is, first thing is malignancy. Any postmenopausal bleeding, malignancy is the most common thing, and then you have to take history and investigate her accordingly. So most common cause for postmenopausal bleeding is, next we will see. Yeah, tumors, endometrial cancer is the correct one. So most common cause is endometrial cancer. Vaginal atrophy, uterine atrophy. Uterine atrophy doesn't, yeah, endometrial atrophy also causes bleeding. Even vaginal atrophy also causes bleeding. But you have to investigate her keeping in mind malignancy. What's happening? Yeah, most common causes are like this: genital malignancy. Next causes can be DUB. Next is senile endometritis, decubitus ulcer, urethral caruncle, any retained ART or IUCD. These are the most common causes in case of postmenopausal bleeding. See, next question is, what is that you have to elicit in your history and examination, so that it will lead you to the correct diagnosis. So what is it you have to take in the history? You have to inquire about her presenting complaints. If she is complaining of bleeding PV, so first thing is, when is the onset of bleeding? How many years after the menopause has the bleeding started? What is the duration of bleeding? Whether it is continuous bleeding or intermittent? What is the frequency of bleeding? What is the amount? Whether it is mild, moderate, or profuse? How will you know the amount of bleeding? It is by, in a normal menstrual cycle, what is the amount of bleeding in a normal menstrual cycle? You can send me your replies. Yeah, 50 to 80 ml is the normal amount of bleeding. And so you have to inquire how many number of pads are soaked. How much does each pad hold? How much blood does one pad hold? If she says the entire pad is soaked with blood, how much does one pad hold? How do you know whether it is 50 ml or 80 ml? A single pad of blood, when it is completely soaked, it holds around 5 to 15 ml of blood. So by inquiring about the number of pads she is using, you can roughly calculate the amount of bleeding she is having. Yeah, 5 ml to 15 ml is the correct answer. Each pad holds 5 ml to 15 ml of blood when it is completely soaked. So if she says she is using 3 pads, you can roughly calculate she is using it is around 30 ml like that. So according to that, you can calculate the amount of blood loss. Any associated clots she is passing along with that, or any associated pain she is having. You have to inquire about all these things. And whether she has any history of similar episodes in the past. It is the first episode or she is having those similar episodes. And whether any offensive discharge is present along with bleeding. Because offensive discharge is associated with carcinoma cervix or pyometra. Pyometra is collection of pus in the uterine cavity. It is called pyometra. So when there is pyometra also, she can have bleeding and offensive discharge per vaginum. And whether the discharge she is having per vaginum, whether it is blood stained or not. Blood stained discharge is present in case of CA cervix, carcinoma vagina, and cervical polyps. So if she has any associated pain, fever, changes in bladder and bowel function, all these things, pain, fever, bladder and bowel function changes, these are seen in case of tuberculous endometritis or carcinomas, pyometra. Pyometra is associated with pain, fever, changes in bladder and bowel function. Even tuberculous endometritis is also associated with such features. So you need to inquire even in a change in bowel habits. Next. So next is, what is it? So next is, we have seen what is it we have to see in history. Next is postcoital bleeding. You have to inquire even regarding postcoital bleeding, because postcoital bleeding is associated with cervical carcinoma or cervical polyp. And yeah, we will elicit even any, if she has taken any OC pills also, it is also very important to note in history. So next is postcoital bleeding. Whether she is having any postcoital bleeding, any postmenopausal bleeding with associated with mass abdomen. It is usually seen in case of a fibroid, any endometrial cancer, pyometra, associated with carcinoma cervix, or any feminizing ovarian tumor. So all these are associated with mass abdomen along with postmenopausal bleeding. And whether she has any mass descending per vaginum, because if there is any mass, in case of a prolapse, she can have a decubitus ulcer, which presents as bleeding per week. And also in CA cervix, cervical polyp turned malignant. All these conditions are associated with even mass descending per vaginum along with bleeding. And next is whether she has any loss of appetite, loss of weight, which are seen in case of any malignancies associated with loss of appetite and loss of weight. Next, if it is associated, you have to inquire whether postmenopausal bleeding is associated with any menopause-like symptoms like any frequency of picturation, urgency, whether she has any stress incontinence, any palpitations, any hot flushes. These are also to be noted. And now we have to also inquire about drug history, like whether there is any intake of estrogen and progesterone or any local estrogen applications, because these are also associated with bleeding per vaginum, because estrogen, progesterone or local estrogen will cause endometrial hyperplasia, and that might lead to again bleeding PV. Any tamoxifen therapy for breast cancer, if she has taken, this also leads to increased risk of ovarian cancer or endometrial cancer. Any history of oral contraceptive pill use in the past, whether she has taken any oral contraceptive pills, because OC pills will protect against cancer endometrium, but they increase the risk of cancer cervix. OC pills are protective against CA, endometrium or ovary, but they increase the risk of carcinoma cervix. So we have to inquire about even OC pill use and whether she has undergone any previous investigations or any treatment for postmenopausal bleeding. Some women might undergo HRT, hormone replacement therapy. So we have to inquire even about that. Next, you have to inquire whether she has taken any pap smear, ultrasound, any fractional curettage was done previously, and any hysteroscopy is done. These all should be inquired. Next is history. So this is all, the previous one is all the presenting complaints, in which you have to note all these things in the presenting complaints. Next we go for history. In the history we will ask about her past menstrual history. In the past menstrual history we have to inquire, it is elicited as usual, like you elicit the number of days, the number of pads, and how frequent are her cycles. All these things you have to, apart from that, you have to also ask about her age of menarche. Is it a late menopause? And because late menopause always predisposes to ovarian and endometrial cancer. And whether she has any history suggestive of PCOD. What is the history that suggests PCOD? If she has any irregular, infrequent cycles, anovulation or unopposed estrogen exposure. These are all will suggest PCOD, and PCOD is a risk factor for endometrial cancer, because unopposed estrogen again causes endometrial hyperplasia. Endometrial hyperplasia has a risk of endometrial cancer later. Next is menopausal history. And what are the menopausal history you have to inquire about? You have to ask her about her age of menopause, whether the menopause is sudden or gradual, any symptoms, and whether menopause is associated with any symptoms, and any history of hormone replacement therapy in her menopause. Next, you have to inquire her obstetric history. What will you take? Whether she is nulliparous and whether she has taken any treatment for infertility, because nulliparity and infertility both are associated with again endometrial cancer. They are risk factors for carcinoma endometrium, and multiparity is associated with carcinoma cervix. Next is any past medical or surgical history, whether she is hypertensive, diabetic, or any other comorbidities, whether she is having, you have to inquire about them. Next is her marital history. What is the duration of marriage? When is the onset of sexual activity? Any early marriage with multiple sexual partners are predisposing factors for carcinoma cervix. And any history of infertility or induction of ovulation. Infertility again and induction of ovulation are risk factors for ovarian cancer. So when a woman presents with postmenopausal bleeding, every history is very, very important. You have to inquire about each and everything. Next is even family history is important. You have to inquire whether the mother or sister has any breast cancer, ovarian cancer, colon cancer, or any endometrial cancer in the family, because all this will again lead to endometrial carcinoma in this woman. So these will represent that she has BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes, and the mutations in this will lead to ovarian cancer, hereditary ovarian cancer. And this even colon cancer or breast or anything cancer will indicate that she has HNPCC gene again, which carries a high risk for endometrial and ovarian cancer. So even family history is important. Next is personal history. Personal history, you will inquire what kind of food is she taking, any anemia if it is there, have to note, because since she is having, this will talk about the whether the woman is suffering from anemia or not. Next is examination. On examining the woman, what will you note? On general examination, you will note her pallor, any pedal edema is present, supraclavicular nodes. Since it is a case of malignancy, you have to even palpate for supraclavicular nodes. On general examination, you have to note all these things. And how is her build? Obese patients are again a risk factor for endometrial cancer. If there is any cachexia, it indicates that she is again a risk factor for malignancy. And hypertensive. Hypertension is also one of the again risk factor for endometrial cancer. Next, you have to check her vitals. And next, you have to go for systemic examination. You have to check her CVS, CNS, respiratory system examination. All you have to do on examination. Next examination is abdominal examination, which is very, very important because you have to palpate for any mass, and where you have to see whether she is having any hepatosplenomegaly, or you have to palpate for again ascites. Ascites is again associated with ovarian cancer. So you have to look for ascites. And on percussion, if ascites is there, you have to percuss and look for the signs of ascites. Next, inspection of external genitalia. So if external genitalia inspection is very, very important in case of any vulval cancer, because in vulval cancer what happens, you can find any ulcer, growth, lump or discharge. Otherwise in ovarian or endometrial cancer, external genitalia look normal. Next is per speculum examination. You have to inspect the vagina, the cervix, whether you have to see whether there are any growths, ulcers, warts, and look for any senile vaginitis. And on inspection of cervix, you have to look for again any growth, whether any ulcer is there, any polyp coming through the os, any discharge, and whether the bleeding is through the os or not, you have to note it down. Because if the bleeding is coming through the os, it is an indication that it is a uterine bleeding. And next is bimanual pelvic examination. You will do, and you will see whether there is any, first you will feel the cervix on bimanual examination, and you can feel if there is any ulcer or growth. And in case of carcinoma cervix, how will the growth be? It will be very friable. That is, it will be coming out in pieces, and there is bleeding on touch, and induration if it is there, whether it is there or not. Next, you have to note down the size of the uterus, whether the uterus is anteverted, enlarged, and whether the uterus is mobile or not. It is fixed. Always uterus is immobile in case of any cancers. And if the uterus is enlarged, whether it is soft to feel or hard. In case of cancers, it is hard. But if it is very soft, then, and if there is any pain on palpation of the uterus, it indicates it might be associated with pyometra. Pyometra is usually associated with carcinoma cervix. And you have to note down whether it is fixed or not, whether it is mobile. And next, you have to palpate the fornices to see any parametrial involvement or any adnexial involvement in case of carcinoma cervix or endometrium. Next, in all the cancers, you have to, in all malignancies, you have to remember that examination is not over with bimanual pelvic examination. It is over only when you do even a perrectal examination. It is a must in case of malignancies. So, perrectal examination, what will you note? That whether any involvement of the rectal mucosa is seen, which is seen in case of carcinoma cervix, any parametrial or uterosacral ligaments involved, so that they will feel very hard or stone-like. In case of, it is again seen in case of cervical carcinoma, and whether any nodules are present in pouch of Douglas, which is seen in case of ovarian malignancy. So till here you have to do an examination and history, and examination are complete after you complete all these procedures. Next is, so next case, we will see next case, and let's see how many of you will answer this. Mrs. X had menopause at 50 years. She is obese, hypertensive, and para 1, and has no positive history or findings on examination. On perspective examination, cervix is healthy, flushed with vagina, os is stenostic, upper vagina is narrow, bleeding through the os is seen. On pervaginum, uterus is anteverted, normal size, mobile, adnexia and parametry are free, pouch of Douglas doesn't have any nodules. So what do you think the diagnosis is, and how will you proceed in such a case? Yes. TVS? Why you don't want to? Why do you want to go for TVS? Okay, as a TVS as an investigation is okay, but what do you want to do? What is that? What is the diagnosis you want to make? Or you want to rely only on TVS and investigations for diagnosis? You don't want to think about anything? Yes, endometrial cancer, good. So why endometrial cancer? I'll tell you why. Yes, endometrial cancer, good. So why should you think of endometrial cancer? Because since this patient has no local lesion on examination and bleeding is present through the os. Yes, bleeding is through the os. We take it as uterine bleeding. So any uterine bleeding, you have to suspect endometrial cancer. And also endometrial cancer is suspected because she is low parity, nulliparity or low parity, obese, hypertensive, uterine bleeding with no positive findings on examination. All these things will help you to decide that it is a probable case of endometrial cancer. Yes, history of hypertension, okay. So all these things, low parity, obesity, hypertension, leading through from the uterus, and no positive findings on examination, all these things will indicate that you have to suspect it as endometrial cancer and proceed with investigations. So now you have suspected. So now we will see how the bleeding presents in case of genital tract malignancy. In case of endometrial carcinoma, it is a postmenopausal bleeding in 75% of the cases. It is slight, irregular or continuous, and at times it can be even excessive. And sometimes it can be associated with watery or offensive discharge, indicating pyometra. And how will the bleeding be in case of cervical carcinoma? It is irregular or continuous vaginal bleeding, which may be at times brisk. And it is always associated with vaginal discharge, offensive vaginal discharge. And in case of vaginal cancers, abnormal vaginal bleeding, including postcoital bleeding, is seen. Even in carcinoma cervix, postcoital bleeding is present. And it is also associated with power-spilling vaginal discharge. In case of fallopian tube cancers, these are all very not so common. These are very rare. But just let's see how bleeding presents in these also. Fallopian tube cancer also presents with postmenopausal bleeding, but the main feature of this is intermittent profuse watery discharge, which is called hydrops tubae profluens. This is also present with along with bleeding. And in case of sarcoma uterus, there is an irregular postmenopausal bleeding with abnormal vaginal discharge, which is offensive, watery, associated with expulsion of fleshy necrotic mass is present in case of sarcoma uterus. This is how bleeding presents in all cases of malignancies. Next is We will see how the bleeding is seen in case of dysfunctional uterine bleeding. What is dysfunctional uterine bleeding? It is when no cause is found. That is abnormal uterine bleeding without any clinically detectable organic, systemic or any iatrogenic cause. When no cause is found, then we classify it as DUB. And what is the most common type of DUB in postmenopausal cases? It is atrophy of the endometrium. Because of the absence of estrogen or failure of the uterine receptors to become responsive to estrogen and unopposed progesterone action, there is atrophy of the endometrium and bleeding is seen. So what are the other causes you have to keep in mind? Endometrial atrophy, endometrial hyperplasia, uterine polyp, tubercular endometritis, withdrawal bleeding after estrogen intake in case of hormone replacement therapy, urethral polyp, prolapsed mucosa and carcinoma, and it is unknown in case of 25% of cases, and incidence usually reduces with the use of hysteroscopy. So next question is, how would you like to investigate a case of postmenopausal bleeding? If the woman complaining of postmenopausal bleeding comes to you, what will you order? How will you investigate such a case? First is, yes, ultrasound, TVS, pap smear. Yes. So first is, you have to go for blood investigations, blood and urine. You have to remember, when you start your investigations, you need to start with blood and urine. Because these postmenopausal cases mostly have hypertensive, diabetes and other tests. Bleeding and clotting tests are also ordered unless she presents with a history. Blood sugars, CBC, complete blood count, blood group, urine routine, microscopy, renal function and liver function tests are important because she is a woman of postmenopausal age group and she can be diabetic or hypertensive taking those drugs. So you need to inquire about the renal function and liver function tests, because you need to see, in case you want to plan her treatment, these are very, very important. And in case you want to go for a CT scan or anything, her kidney should be normal. So for that, you need to get a serum creatinine done. So these are important. Next is, you have to look at her ECG, because she is a case of postmenopausal lady. And next is chest X-ray. How to look for lungs and cardiovascular system, how they are. So these are the important investigations. Next is special investigations. The other investigations are, if there is any visible growth in the cervix, a biopsy has to be taken and sent for histology. And if it is apparently looking normal, then cervical or endocervical smear should be taken to exclude any CIN or dysphagia. A pap smear has become gold standard for screening in case of carcinoma cervix, so it is must. You should never send a postmenopausal lady without doing a pap smear. And the smear should contain cells from SCJ, what is this? Squamocolumnar junction from the transitional zone and also from the endocervix. So Iyer spatula and endocervical brush. See, this is the Iyer spatula, this is the endocervical brush, and here the smear is taken from both the squamocolumnar junction as well as the transitional zone, and here smear is being taken from the endocervix. So both are important. You have to take smear from both the zones and send. And a wooden spatula from the lateral vaginal fornix is taken for cytohormonal study. And aspiration cytology is done in case of endocervical. If you are suspecting any growth from the endocervix, you can aspirate it and send for investigation. So, and what are the special investigations? Is ultrasound. TVS is more accurate because of its proximity to the target tissue. Here the target tissue is either cervix or the uterus. So TVS is more specific, and you will measure the endometrial thickness, and if it is less than 5 mm, it will indicate atrophy. If greater than 5 mm, we should further evaluate the woman. Any thick polypoidal endometrium of 9 to 10 mm of irregular texture or fluid is present, then you have to exclude endometrial malignancy. Next is endometrial sampling. What is endometrial sampling? Endometrial sampling it is one of the diagnostic tests which is done as an outpatient procedure. We usually don't admit the patient, but we do it as an outpatient procedure, and it is usually done in case of women who are having infertility or any abnormal uterine bleeding, and for periodic screening when the woman is put on hormone replacement therapy. And the instrument used for this is Pippel's endometrial sampler, Sharman's curette, or Vibra aspirator. But nowadays we are most commonly using is Pippel's endometrial sampler. This is the Pippel's endometrial sampler. Inside is a plunger. We introduce this gradually through the cervix into the uterine cavity, and we will pull this plunger. Because of the suction action, endometrial tissue comes out through this. That is how we do endometrial sampling. A thin plastic cannula 2 to 4 mm with a plunger within is negotiated into the uterus. When the plunger is withdrawn, adequate endometrium is obtained because of suction action. The failure rate for this is less than 8%, and when large tissue mass is needed for histology, you go for curetting. You do not do endometrial sampling, but you go for directly for curettage under anesthesia. So this is Pippel's endometrial sampler. Next is another procedure we can do is saline infusion sonography. This is also gaining importance nowadays, and many people are doing nowadays saline infusion sonography. What is saline infusion sonography? It is also called as sonohysterography, where you infuse normal saline into the uterine cavity and take a transvaginal ultrasound. It is useful for diagnosing any focal intracavitary pathology, where here a catheter is introduced through the cervical os into the uterine cavity, and saline is infused around 5 to 10 ml, and the uterine cavity is now seen with a transvaginal ultrasound. It is usually done, see, this is how, where you introduce a catheter through the cervix into the uterine cavity, Polish bulb is inflated so that it doesn't come out, and now this is connected to saline, and you gradually introduce saline into the uterine cavity. You introduce your transvaginal ultrasound probe into the cavity, into the cervix, and now you go for imaging. And how does the image appear? In this case, this is called saline infusion. See here a catheter through the cervix into the cavity, and this is the probe introduced into the cervix. And how will the images be? When you introduce saline usually, it doesn't cast any, it is usually dark in color. The uterine wall and saline in the uterine cavity are seen as black or empty space, and inside, in this case, when there is a mass on submucous fibroid, it is seen in the uterine cavity, it is present like this. This space is occupied by the fibroid, submucous fibroid. This is how it looks on saline infusion sonography. Image on ultrasound will look like this. Next, another procedure which is gaining importance is hysteroscopy. What is hysteroscopy? Hysteroscopy is an operative procedure where endometrial cavity is visualized and with the help of a fiber optic telescope. The uterine distension is achieved by carbon dioxide or normal saline or glycine, and the instrument is passed transcervically without cervical dilatation or local anesthesia. And diagnostic hysteroscopy is performed in post-menstrual period, and contact hysteroscopy recently became more popular because it doesn't need any distension medium. So nowadays even we are doing hysteroscopy. So this is how an image on hysteroscope will look like. You will introduce a hysteroscope through the cervical cavity into the uterine cavity, and you will visualize. This is a big endometrial polyp which is attached to the fundus of the uterus, and this is one ostia, and here this is another ostium of the fallopian tubes, and this is the submucous fibroid which is attached to the fundus. This is how image looks on hysteroscope. And another important procedure is endometrial biopsy, but endometrial biopsy is the most reliable method, and it is usually done in the operation theater under anesthesia. So you must have seen us doing endometrial biopsy. This is also called as fractional curettage or dilatation and curettage. It is the most reliable method which is used to study the endometrium, and the material to study is obtained by curating the endometrium after dilatation of the cervix. So it can also be done as outpatient procedure using a Sharman's curette, but we usually do it as inpatient procedure here. And it can also be done under the guidance of sonohysterography or hysteroscopy. We can see the endometrium under with the help of a hysteroscopy, and then we can take a biopsy even like that. Next is fractional curettage. What is the difference between normal dilatation in curettage and fractional curettage? And mostly when you're suspecting a malignancy, you always do a fractional curettage instead of dilatation and curettage. So what is the difference between these two? Anybody? It is not only a definite method for diagnosis, but it also detects what is the growth in case of endometrial malignancy. And it is always done under anesthesia, and care should be taken not to perforate the uterus. If pyometra is detected, it has to be postponed for 1 week to prevent any perforation or any causing any systemic infection. And it is also, because it is called fractional curettage, because not only the endometrial cavity is curated, also endocervical cavity is also curated. Endocervical curettage is also accompanied with endometrial curettage, where you have to note the uterus cervical length, and uterus is curated at the fundus and lower part of the body, and endocervical cavity is also curated. And finally, you will introduce a polyp forceps and see if there is any endometrial polyp is present. Next is laparoscopy is also used nowadays. And what is laparoscopy? It is a technique of visualization of the peritoneal cavity with a with the use of a fiber optic endoscope when it is introduced through the abdominal wall. The prior pneumoperitoneum is achieved by introduction of either carbon dioxide or air, and it is used mostly for diagnosis of fibroids or any follow-up after ovarian malignancy. This is mostly used, laparoscopy. So this is how the picture is in case of laparoscopy. This is how you will visualize the abdominal cavity. This is the uterus. It is seen like this. These are the fallopian tubes, and this is the, what is this? This is the round ligament attached, and this is the ovary here. This is the broad ligament, this entire thing. These both are the uterosacral ligaments. This is the pouch of Douglas, and this is how our ovary looks like on laparoscopic picture, and this is the round ligament attached to the side wall. Next, CT. What is the use of CT in case of malignancies? It provides a high resolution two-dimensional image and cross sections of the body at close intervals. So pelvic organs can be differentiated from gastrointestinal and urinary systems using a contrast media. And this contrast media is given either, it is usually done in case of metastasis. Or you can even do CT when you want to note down, when you want to know whether the abdominal mass is arising from the uterus or whether it is gastrointestinal mass. When you want to differentiate both of them, you can go for CECT. What is the contrast enhanced CT? So you can do even in case of any myomas. If there is a big myoma pushing the uterus to one side, and you want to know whether it is actually a uterine fibroid or an ovarian mass, even then we go for CECT, where the contrast media is usually given orally, intravenously or rectally, and you have to do a CT scan. Next, it is also useful in the diagnosis of any lymph node metastasis, and also to note what is the depth of myometrial invasion in case of endometrial cancer, any ovarian mass and myomas. It is useful for differentiating all these things, and it also helps in percutaneous needle biopsy of any suspected lymph nodes. You can take needle biopsy then and there in case of CT, and it also helps in staging of ovarian cancer. We usually do staging of ovarian cancer using CT. So this is how the image looks on CT. This is the ovarian mass which can be clearly demarcated, and doing the CT will help in staging the ovarian cancer. Next is MRI. What is the role of MRI? MRI, it creates a cross-sectional images of the body using a combination of radio waves and magnetic fields. So it is used in differentiation of endometrium, inner and outer myometrium of the uterus, measurement of the depth of the myometrial penetration in case of endometrial cancer preoperatively, and whether there is any parametrial invasion in case of cervical cancer, and also, but it can never identify any lymph node metastasis. MRI is not useful in metastasis, but it helps in other things. So mostly we use CT instead of MRI. So if you find any benign lesion on examination, that does not rule out malignancy. So you have to be very, very vigilant. Detection of a benign lesion should not prevent further detailed investigation to rule out malignancy. This thing you have to remember. In any case of postmenopausal bleeding, benign lesion will never rule out malignancy. So you have to investigate the woman completely. And treatment, if the cause is found, treatment is directed to the cause. If there is no cause, only minimal bleeding once or twice, you have to observe the woman. And if you want to preserve the uterus, then you can conserve it, or you can, if there is a recurrence or continuous bleeding, you can go for laparoscopic vaginal hysterectomy or hysterectomy with bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy. You can do it either laparoscopically or normally. You have to proceed with this. So we'll just go. How will you evaluate a patient? We'll take an overall look. So if there is a woman with postmenopausal bleeding per vaginum, you will take a history, do general examination, abdominal, bimanual pelvic, speculum examination, and even parrectal examination. If there is no risk factor found, you will investigate for a TVS. And if the endometrium is less than 4 mm, you have to reassure her and ask her to come for follow-up. And if the symptoms persist, then you have to further evaluate her. If the risk factors are present and endometrium is greater than 4 mm on transvaginal sonography, you will either do an endometrial biopsy or office hysteroscopy, or you can post her for fractional curettage. And if there is any endometrial polyp seen, then you can do hysteroscopic removal or normal removal of the polyp. And you have to send the material for HPE, and depending on the HPE, you have to plan the treatment accordingly. So this is the overall algorithm for treating a woman with postmenopausal bleeding. So any doubts? First and foremost is you should always keep in mind any postmenopausal bleeding means it is first and foremost cause is malignancy. Any doubts? Okay, then August 15th is coming. So take care of yourself and Jai Hind. Any doubts? Contraindication of sonohysterography, it is present in your books. You can go through in your textbooks also. Every procedure has contraindications, but okay, then I am ending my session now.